Can you all see that I have this participants tab open, or do you only see my slides right now?
You just see your slides.
Okay, good. Sierra, do you think we should send out a starting now email, or do you think everyone has the information? Because there's not one particular link, so I'm not sure.
Everybody that registered in Zoom should have it on their calendar. I can see if I can quickly send one out from that platform.
Oh, so if they registered, it would have gone there. Okay. I just was surprised that people hadn't joined yet. Okay.
Gotcha. Yeah, maybe I should have sent out one reminder on like Monday from MailChimp or something. It looks like we have some people filtering in now.
Yeah. I think it just takes a minute. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. We're just going to get started in a couple of minutes. I see people are trickling in now. Okay, it's a couple minutes past the hour, so I think we're just going to get started with at least a couple of housekeeping items. So thank you, everybody, for joining us, and welcome to the Upgrading OpenLMIS webinar. We are very excited you were able to join us today, and excited to explain some more information about this topic and share some really interesting insights from our speakers. Before we dive in, I just wanted to touch on a couple of housekeeping points about how we'll run the webinar. So Sarah is our associate who will be managing the webinar admin and keeping everybody on mute so we don't have a lot of background noise during the presentation. But she'll also be managing the chat and questions throughout the presentation. So we do encourage you to interact and provide comments and feedback. Although you'll be on mute, we still do encourage interaction, and we have budgeted time at the end of the webinar to have some discussion and time for Q&A. So she'll be filtering through your questions, and hopefully we'll be able to get to them all at the end of the webinar. Today's webinar will be recorded, and we will be circulating that recording as well as the slide deck to everyone who's registered in Zoom. So you will be getting that in your inboxes. And I will now introduce our presenters. We are very lucky to have a great group of people presenting for us today. I'll start with myself. I am Rebecca Alban, the OpenLMIS Community Manager, and I'll be speaking on behalf of the OpenLMIS Community Initiative as a whole, the global initiative. My colleague Wesley Brown, who is our OpenLMIS Product Manager, is joining us today from Kenya. We also have with us Chong Sung An, who is the Software Development Engineer for Village Reach, based in Seattle, United States. And we have two colleagues joining us from Mozambique. The first is Momad Meji, who is the OpenLMIS Technical Advisor for the PSM project funded by USAID. And finally, we will hear from Filimone Amone, who is the Information Systems Technician for Village Reach and is also based in Mozambique. So we wanted to extend a warm welcome to all of our speakers, and again, thank them for their time and their preparation for today's webinar and for being with us today. I'll just quickly run through our webinar outline. I will first just do some introductory slides outlining how upgrading OpenLMIS fits into the community vision overall. And then we'll hear from Wes about two particular projects that our core team has worked on, the GAP and the Casper projects, and he'll talk about how that has helped us advance toward this vision. And then Chong Sung will dive into some more technical details about the Casper project in particular, and also show us a quick demo video that he created for this webinar. And lastly, we'll hear from our two colleagues in Mozambique to describe the current work that they're doing to work toward an upgrade in Mozambique, and talk through some of their key considerations and lessons learned from their experience so far. And lastly, we'll wrap up with some time for discussion and Q&A based on the feedback that we get from our chat. So today's webinar, as you know, will focus on the topic of upgrading older versions of the OpenLMIS software to our newest version, the 3.0 version. And this idea is really integrated into the OpenLMIS vision overall, to employ a community approach where all countries who use OpenLMIS can share code and share new features and share those enhancements across our global community of users. And that's sort of what we've tried to articulate in this top blue box that you see, the shared investment, shared benefit concept. And this approach is really made possible when countries are using the newest version of OpenLMIS. The older versions don't have the same microservices architecture that allow for this code sharing. And so that's why we really find this topic is important, because it's a key part of our philosophy, and that countries should be able to benefit from each other's work, share efficiencies, and really work together to advance the technology together as a community. So you may have seen this map before. This outlines the current OpenLMIS implementations that we have throughout Africa. And I just wanted to highlight the countries who are currently using version 3, which are Angola and Malawi. And the remaining countries on this map were implemented prior to the existence of version 3. So those countries are using the older versions of OpenLMIS. And countries like Tanzania and Mozambique, who you'll hear from a little bit later in this webinar, are countries who are already starting to think about this upgrade process and have already engaged in the initial conversations and processes to get this off the ground. So I just wanted to sort of provide this macro view of geographically where potential upgrades are. So clearly the upgrade process is not an easy or simple task, particularly if you're engaging at the national level. There would be many players involved, the Ministry of Health being at the center of the process, but also partner organizations and other OpenLMIS community member organizations would all have a role to play and to support an upgrade process. So in today's webinar, we'll hear more about the work that the OpenLMIS core team has done to sort of charter out this upgrade process. And we'll also hear from our colleagues in Mozambique about from the country perspective, what it takes from national stakeholders to get the upgrade conversation started, to get the processes underway. So we're hoping to clarify some of these roles that different stakeholders would take in supporting an upgrade process. And I also just wanted to do a quick overview of what we see as some of the key benefits to upgrading an older version of OpenLMIS. Excuse me. The first and most obvious would be that you would get access to a new set of features that you don't currently have. So you'd expand what you can currently do. A couple examples of those new features are our new reporting and analytics platform, which has been, we've gotten great reactions from in terms of its ease of use and visuals. It's a really great tool for routine reporting and also for performance improvement. Our stock management function is another newer module that has been added with version 3, as well as support for vaccine management and cold chain features. Another benefit would be regarding ongoing maintenance and operations. So you would get technical support from the community to do things like fix bugs, and you would get continual software updates, which basically means continued performance improvement for the software free of cost. So this would all be integrated into the community processes that we already have. Another benefit is that OpenLMIS version 3 uses standards which would enable the system to interoperate with other systems, meaning that they can work with and talk to other systems that are also built as open source. So working with tools like DHIS2 or an open source warehouse management system would allow your version of OpenLMIS to integrate into those systems and integrate into the overall open source architecture in your country. And the last bullet is the shared value. That's this concept that I mentioned previously about benefiting as a community from what others are doing. So if, for example, in a few months, our Malawi implementation decided to add a new feature, then Angola and any other user of version 3 would automatically get that new feature or that enhancement for free. These upgrades would happen as a part of our community processes and free of charge to any of the countries who are using them. So that's just a quick rundown of some of the benefits, and we'll get into some more details as we move through the webinar. I'll hand things over to Wes now.
Thanks so much, Rebecca. So no discussion about upgrading OpenLMIS to version 3 is complete without going into a little bit of the detail of what the GAP project is and why it existed. This project was funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation along with partnership with USAID and the Digital Square. And it was supported by the wider OpenLMIS community, including Village Reach, ONA, JSI, Soldevelo. And most importantly, I would say that it was a partnership with many of the existing implementations of OpenLMIS, including the Zambia implementation and the Tanzania, who provided really excellent feedback, as did Malawi, who was instrumental in helping us keep focused on what we needed to do here. So as Rebecca has alluded to, this project was an effort to be able to maximize that shared investment and shared benefit portion of the OpenLMIS mandate. So previously, many of the different versions of OpenLMIS were slightly different. So they were sort of compatible, but not quite. So as each country updated themselves, it became more and more difficult to be able to provide that shared benefit because each version was different. This also then mapped into the community and the product management kind of forking off into its own little world, and it's like a continued forking of not just the code, but also all the stuff surrounding the code. So the GAP project was an effort to be able to bring together some of the features in the older versions of OpenLMIS and bring them over to version 3 so that it would provide an upgrade path for the implementations of the older versions of OpenLMIS to be able to upgrade to version 3. In particular, we were focused on working with Tanzania and Zambia because they had some of the more mature OpenLMIS or eLMIS platforms. And so they were instrumental in being involved in figuring out what were the gaps that we needed to fill in version 3. And like I said, the whole benefit, the whole focus of this was to be able to get that shared investment and that shared benefit of the overall code base so that everybody could be able to be using the same code base and be able to benefit from the updates that are done. Next slide, please, Rebecca. So some of the main benefits for the GAP project were to be able to lay that groundwork for upgrading to version 3, also to be able to incorporate the feedback from lots of countries so that each country would be able to provide feedback on what were their priorities in terms of the feature sets that were missing in the version 3, and also be able to provide feedback on the features that maybe didn't really need to be brought over, that were too specific for a given implementation. Likewise, we also use this as an opportunity to be able to collaborate between countries and the various partners that were involved in OpenLMIS. And like I mentioned before, we had a pretty wide community of people that were involved in the project. And then lastly, it allowed us to be able to align on what our community, what the values of our community would be, what the values of the software would be, and our goals going forward. Go ahead, Rebecca, next slide, please. Now, I won't go into every single feature that we worked on in the GAP project. I'm just going to highlight 5 of them here, just as a kind of representative of some of the work that we did. If you're interested in seeing everything, you can go on our wiki and search for the GAP feature groupings. To start, one of the big features we did was an OpenHIE integration, which allowed us to be able to synchronize facility information and not have to store that within OpenLMIS as a system of record. This is a big thing that I wanted to highlight because it really highlights the level of integration we have with external systems and how that's one of the core features that we continue to try to highlight in our OpenLMIS development. Now, we also worked on the creation of a new reporting engine. I think it's pretty advanced. It's actually very impressive. It's based on top of an excellent open source system called Superset, which allows for very intuitive creation of very nice looking reports and graphs and charts that you don't need a developer to go in and have to customize, but you as a power user can actually configure yourself. We also added the ability to get consolidated notifications, which is something that seems small, but is actually something that many users have been asking for a while, especially those district users that would get 20, 30, or even more notifications in a given near the end of like a requisition period. We also provided initial support for DHIS2. We're still working on an automatic sending of that DHIS information to a DHIS2 server. So we have automated the generation of the DHIS2 information, which simplifies gathering that data significantly. And then we also have laid the groundwork for the upgrade process involved for version 3. Next slide, please. So this is just a very basic view of the work that we did in the GAP project. You can see we completed 23 tickets and 21 were not prioritized. This may be a little bit funny to highlight, but I actually think it's kind of important. These 21 tickets were not prioritized by chance, but actually the OpenLMIS community came together and decided that some of the things that we had thought about working on for the GAP project really were not as important as we thought they were. And so as a community, we were able to focus what we wanted to do with OpenLMIS, both in the present for the GAP project specifically, but then also going forward as we really hone in on what OpenLMIS provides in terms of a feature set, but also what it can provide in the future. Then those 5 tickets that were not started are actually things that we have identified as being valuable, and we're just waiting for the right time to be able to implement them. So even though we didn't do them as part of the GAP project, they're still slated and can be prioritized by the community. Go ahead, Rebecca, thanks. So that was the GAP project. And in the same way that the GAP project was focused on being able to move the features that were existing in previous versions of OpenLMIS, in previous versions of OpenLMIS to the current version, the Casper project is focused on providing a data migration path for older systems of OpenLMIS to newer systems. This system provides the ability to both run version 2 and version 3 systems simultaneously and have that data flow from version 2 into version 3 in real time so that a gradual or a partitioned upgrade can be accomplished. This migration occurs without any direct changes to version 2 or version 3, and instead leverages streaming technology to seamlessly detect changes, perform any required transformations, and migrate that data to a new system. The reason that we highlight superset in this graph here is just to show that this is actually a wonderful way for implementations that are interested in being able to leverage the superset system to be able to do so and also provide an upgrade path to version 3 in the future. So I think I'm going to hand things over now to Chang-Sung, who's going to give a little bit more detail on the Casper project and even tell you why we're calling it that. Thanks.
Thanks, Wes. So I'm going to give a technical overview of Project Casper. Next slide. So some of the main goals of the project was to enable version 2, or also known as ELMIS, to be able to access version 3, particularly things like the reporting stack, which the main piece is superset, without performing sort of a full upgrade, sort of like a one-time big bang migration. And so we call this a ghost migration because the version 3 system, even though it's not being actively used, is kind of still in the background, sort of as a ghost. And this actually leads to sort of how we decided to name the project Casper, since it's sort of a friendly ghost migration because it's fairly seamless. We named it after the TV show Casper the Friendly Ghost. So that's why it's called Project Casper. And basically kind of enabling this allows countries to perform sort of a gradual transition to version 3 so that both version 2 or ELMIS and version 3 systems would kind of coexist. And it makes sort of the upgrade process easier to manage since you don't have to do it all sort of as a one-time big bang kind of migration. Next slide. So here are some of the values that the project gives. So the first thing is that it would be resilient. So basically, as sort of the system just runs continuously, so that when the version 2 and version 3 system are connected between them, that basically the data flows, and it can flow for a long time, and any kind of changes that happen in ELMIS would get picked up in version 3. Another value is that the data is usable in near real time, so that when you make a change to the version 2 system, that it will show up in the version 3 system in seconds to minutes, not kind of waiting for some sort of script to happen the next morning or at the beginning of the week. Another value is that the source system, meaning the version 2 system or an earlier version, is unaware that that this sort of data flow is happening, and it's unaffected. So no changes need to be made to ELMIS. And the last one is that it's automated, that we don't have to do any kind of one-time or manual changes to a system or just some sort of tweak, that the whole process is automated, and any kind of changes would sort of be going through the whole automated process. Next slide. So this is sort of an architecture diagram. I'm not going to go through everything in this, but just so you kind of know the technical details of all the components in the Casper system. You'll notice that at the top we have the version 2 system, and over on the right we have the version 3 system. And basically data automatically flows from the top to the center, where all of the transformation is happening to fit into the version 3 system, and then it moves it over to the right. Next slide. So generally the technical approach that we've used for this system so just kind of showing the tools. We pick up changes in version 2 using this tool called Debezium. And we use sort of a streaming architecture. The whole process is a streaming processing using Kafka, which is a well-known tool for streaming. And the main transformations from the version 2 schema to the version 3 schema is done in a tool called NiFi. Next slide. And so now we'll show a demo video of sort of the version 2 and version 3 systems working together. As you make a change in version 2, you can see it show up in version 3.
Casper project, a pipeline which uses stream processing to automatically sync data from an OpenLMIS version 2 system, also known as ELMIS, to an OpenLMIS version 3 system in near real time. We are going to demo changes made in a test ELMIS system and show how those changes sync up with the test version 3 system. We have set up this particular demo to sync requisition data. So first, let's look at the ELMIS system. Log in as a store in charge, one who can create and submit requisitions. And we will take a look at an existing requisition in ELMIS, one for this facility name, this program, and the period of May, June. It has already been initiated, so let's take a look at it. And as you can see, it has a bunch of line items with data in it. Now let's look at the version 3 system that has the corresponding requisition. You'll note that you can only view requisitions in the version 3 system, as it's read-only. We don't want to make changes here. All the changes get made from the version 2 system. And then we can see that we have the corresponding requisition in version 3, which we can view, and we see that it has the same information. So now let's make some changes in the ELMIS requisition. For example, let's add some requested quantities. Okay, so instead of submitting it, we will save it. So now the requisition has been saved successfully in ELMIS. And if we refresh version 3, and we take a look at the requested quantities, we see that we have the changes that have been made in ELMIS. We can also do that with something like adjustments. So let's say we have some that have been damaged. Then we also need to change the corresponding line item information. And let's go ahead and save that. And then let's go to version 3 and see the system, refresh it. And now we see that the corresponding adjustment has been synced in the version 3 system. We can also do this with comments. So let's create a comment and then save. It has been saved. And if we refresh the version 3 system, we see that the corresponding requisition has now synced the comment. And if we submit the requisition and change its status, okay, so it has now been submitted. Let's just check the ELMIS. Going to another user who would authorize this submitted requisition. And we select the same, and we see that it's submitted. Now if we go to the version 3 system and go back to that list of requisitions, we can see that the requisition has been submitted. So you can see that the pipeline allows us to sync data from an ELMI system to a version 3 system in near real time automatically. Of the Casper project, a pipeline which uses
Great, thank you for that video, Chong-Sung. Any final comments before we move on?
No, I don't have any further things.
Okay, great. And we will move on to hear from our colleagues from Mozambique and begin with Momad Meji.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Momad Meji from PSM Mozambique project, and I will present the journey to implementing OpenLMIS in Mozambique. So, Rebecca, can you? Yes, in this picture, we try to show how our supply chain was before in the implementation of OpenLMIS. As you can see, this pyramid, the blue color shows the computerized area, and only 2% of public health supply chain is visible. Only the warehouse had computerized system. Like you see, we have here 3 central warehouse, provincial warehouse, district warehouse. In a central warehouse, we use a system called MAX, that is a warehouse management system. In the provincial and district warehouse, we use a system called SIMAM since 2010, that is Microsoft Access based. And we have another system that we start to use since 2015 that called Ferramenta Central, work like a data warehouse, master data management, and to give us the visibility and the availability, distribution planning, and M&E. In the red area, we had a lack of visibility in the vast majority of the system. 98% of the stocking points missing critical data. No health facility consumption data. As you can see, we are talking about not having visibility of consumption of 1,579 health facility, a lot of health facility. No stock out data at the bottom of the pyramid. So, in resume, before 2016, a large time burden placed on the healthcare workers using paper-based system, reducing the time spent caring for patients. Calculation errors in health supply orders. Since everything was done manually, the orders were always produced with many errors. Lack of last time consumption data for decision makers at the district, provincial, and national levels. So data not flowing to the central level managers that sometimes contributed to the delay in decision making. Okay, we can go ahead. So to minimize the impact of using manual system, it was decided to use OpenLMIS 4 bottom of the pyramid system, transaction visibility at health facility, stock and consumption data. So we start in the 2016 development of mobile solution and the customization of OpenLMIS to the web portal. A pilot phase was conducted in Maputo province in the 8 health facility. In this year, stakeholders selected this program for national level rollout across the public health system. So in 2017, the Central Medical Authority of the Ministry of Health of Mozambique officially adopted as the ELMS to be rolled out. At that time, the goal was to reach 30% of health facility by 2020. We are talking about 473 health facility. In this year also, we already had 1,157 health facility using OpenLMIS. So in 2018, we already had 815 health facility using cycles of LMIS, to say that we had already reached more than 50% of health facility. That is 20% more than planned for 2020. Oh, that was great. In this year, was made the gap analysis to upgrade the OpenLMIS V2 to V3. After that, in 2019, we start and finish the implementation of phase 1 of upgrade OpenLMIS V2 to V3. Basically, it was to get mobile functionality and put it on the web portal. So we upgrade to the mobile application version 8.6, which improved functionality and new reports. And in this year, we increased it to 940 health facility that periodically reporting data. We are talking about 16% of all health facility. Fantastic, huh? For 2020, we are planning to start existing LMS system like SIMAM, like I talked, SIMAM, that will digital levels and hospital to the OpenLMIS version 3 and increase to more than 1,200 health facility by the end of fiscal year 20. So for more detail, when I say we are using mobile application is based on Android, and we call Siglos, is a cloud-based logistic management information system for health facility, used to report stock data via tablet, capture data on stock on hand, quantity issued, quantity received, adjustments, quantity requested, patient by regimen for ARV, EL, and rapid test. Health facility use Sigils also to generate, send monthly or quarterly requisition. So this mobile app is good because they work online or offline, and it's transactional workflow, automated calculation for requisition process, alerts, give us alerts for low stock levels, overstocking, understocking, and upcoming expire, and the product expire date and batch information. Requisition to supply warehouse. User interface is mimic paper form that is familiar to healthcare workers. to contribute to reduce training burden. And all essential products, including anti-malarial drugs, antiretroviral, contraceptives, rapid diagnosis tests, antibiotic, essential medicine, key medical articles. Yes, Rebecca. So, and we have also the web portal that is customized to give us the report for Mozambique, such as week-based drug report, facility level and aggregate report and visualization, data export for further analysis, access to all submitted requisition, access to stock card and transaction of products, tracking of synchronization status and other requisition timeline. And also we use a web portal like administration area to add the master data to use in the web in the Android application. So for Challenger, we found that the concept of kit management that OpenLMIS community have is little different from the concept that Moz has. For Moz, kit is like some box with medicines that when unpacking, it is reflected in stock card of each product. I think for more detail, we can discuss this in another forum. So in Mozambique, we work with two systems of supply chain, pull system and informal push system, okay? So we found that OpenLMIS does not work with both systems simultaneously. From our experience, we find that the use of mobile solution fits the reality of most African countries. Because of the low cost of purchasing and maintaining mobile over laptop, for example. And we have here in Africa bad internet connection and etc. We think that the OpenLMIS community had to look more about using mobile solution for managed medicine for health facility. So we think that managing lots and regime is very rigid in the OpenLMIS. For example, the supply chain in Africa is not a perfect for manager the same lot number from manufacturing to the health facility like GS1 recommend. For most, it's not easy. So it's not yet clear for us how OpenLMIS community will deal with the version management. For example, the development we made in Mozambique are in version 3.5. And OpenLMIS now, I think, is in version 3.6. I will align with the community. So how can we share a benefit with community with developments that we are making? So in terms of a recommendation, it's like, you know, we are using OpenLMIS version 2. So we found that the community no longer support this version. If this is true, our recommendation is that the community have to support all existing version. We know that it's not easy, but it would be the best way to know the difficulty of everyone that using OpenLMIS, and thus would help to create a more robust system. I think so. So it's already presented the advantage of using mobile solution. We think that the community should start thinking about developing an interface for mobile solution for supply chain of medicines. And the last recommendation, we think that for the version management, perhaps think of a solution like Ubuntu use. For example, long-term support. That is, try to not have version with shorter period of difference. Maybe have 2 to 5 years of difference between two versions. Yeah, it's all for our side.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Felimone Amoni Jr. I'm the Information Systems Technician for Village Reach, and I will talk about the road to OpenLMIS v3, and I will go over the challenges and considerations that we must have when upgrading to v3, having the specific use case of Mozambique. So next slide, please, Rebecca. So for Mozambique particularly, one of the major priorities is sustainability. How we can ensure that these information systems can survive over a very long period of time, since they are to be ultimately maintained by the government. They are our client after all. So there are a wide variety of factors that affect the sustainability of information systems and health information systems in particular. But we brought here only 4, and many of those factors, they can fall under one of these 4. We are going to highlight the processes and functionalities, the e-health strategy and policies, governance, and support and maintenance. So in regarding to process and functionalities, the main consideration is to have the information systems replicating on the process that they are supporting. This may sound trivial to say something like that, because that's the ultimate objective of any information systems. But many times we can find the situation that pre-made information systems such as OpenLMIS doesn't support a workflow that exists in the field, and sometimes we may require the health workers to change their process to address so the information system can fit. But what must be done is the other way around. The information systems must replicate the process. When some processes are seen as not being the best, they can be changed, of course, but the information systems must replicate the process, because this will increase the added value. This will keep the end users engaged and over a long period of time in support of the sustainability. The major challenges in this aspect is that processes can change, and sometimes when a process is changed, it implicates changing the information system. So the information system, they must allow this flexibility and having consideration that the processes that are implemented in country, they can change over time, and the information systems must accommodate these changes without major efforts. And also we can have unsupported workflow, which are processes that are not natively supported by the information systems, and this represents a very big challenge. Next slide, please. The second one is the e-health strategy and policies. So the e-health strategy and policies, it's a document that serve as the providing guiding principles for any information systems implementation. And when upgraded to OpenLMIS v3, it must have these policies and strategy in consideration, because this strategy, they provide the groundwork for what's the vision of the country at a much higher level and at a much longer term. So if the information systems align with this strategy, align with these policies, there is a greater buy-in for the government to support these information systems and ensure the sustainability. And also to avoid that the information systems, they cannot go against this process and strategy, because this can represent major roadblocks. For example, if the country has policies for server location, for data ownership, security, access, interoperability, all these aspects, if these aspects are covered in the e-health strategy and policy, they must be followed, because if not, they can undermine all the efforts when upgrading. The challenge in this area is that sometimes this e-health strategy and policy, they are not in place. For the specific case of Mozambique, they are in a very early stage. This can be a benefit, because we can help design this e-health process, this e-health strategy and policy, and advise the government in the correct way to go. But when there is a lack of this, it can be difficult can represent a major challenge to any e-health solution. The second one is that the e-health strategy and policies, they are usually transversal, so they cover many. They do not fall under just the Ministry of Health. They fall under the many government agencies, and we know that collaborations between government agencies sometimes can be difficult, because they move at their own pace, and it represents a very big challenge. Next slide, please. So this is somehow related to the previous one, which is governance. When upgrading to V3, having in consideration aspects such as interoperability, integration with other systems, this requires a very robust governance structure, to allow the definition of the way forward for this implementation. So a governance structure must be put in place. They must have clear terms of reference, a clear steering committee, because as I said, usually there will be many actors, many stakeholders with different agenda, different priorities, and bring them all together. There must be a governance structure and a steering committee to guide this process forward. So when we have, for example, multiple information systems implementers, is where they require a very high coordination. For the specific case of Mozambique, we have a fragmented supply chain. And in order to integrate information system, there is this need of integrating the supply chain. And we are talking about merging two different governance bodies, because there is a governance body that deals with one supply chain, and there is another that deals with the second one, and they need to be brought together. And this represents some major challenges, because the coordination between them may be difficult. And also there is this flexibility. We know that different partners, high coordination requires a lot of coordination, and there must be, sometimes there's not a high flexibility, especially with government bodies, that we must take that into consideration when upgrading. Next slide, please. And the last point is the maintenance and support. So ultimately, as I said in the beginning, the government is the ultimate client, is the one that is going to be responsible at the long term to maintain the information systems. So it requires a very detailed maintenance plan, so they can know exactly how they are going to maintain the system, when the system needs maintenance, and every aspects related to it, from a very high level to a very low level. And also there is a strong need of creating local technical capacity to support not just the development, but the maintenance in order to reduce the costs of maintaining these information systems at the long term, and also keep the community engagement, so we can have these shared benefits and values that the community provides. A major challenge in this area is the retention capabilities of the government. We know that in developing countries, the government have difficulties in maintaining high technical expertise within the human resources ranks. So this must be taken into consideration when upgrading. So there is a very strong need of creating local capacity buildings in human resources for maintaining these systems. So when all these aspects are covered, we can ensure sustainability of an implementation. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you so much, Filimone, and to all of the rest of our speakers. Those were really great, very informative presentations. And I know for our audience members, that was a lot of information to digest. So we want to leave a few minutes for questions and comments. Just I'll quickly summarize some of the key points that we've heard from all of our different speakers before we go into questions. The first is some of the benefits for upgrading would include new features, ongoing support with maintenance. The version 3 would be interoperable with other open source systems. And as I mentioned, enhanced community support, as all of our tools and resources would be geared toward version 3. So that would increase the amount of support from the OpenLMIS community. And as Chong Sung and Wes went over, the upgrade process can be done in a gradual way. It doesn't have to be this big bang approach where all processes and systems are upgraded all at once. It can be done over time to sort of ease the operational burden and change management needs for that process. And sustainability is a term we heard a lot mentioned throughout this webinar, particularly from our Mozambique colleagues. And just to point out again that a software that is upgraded will be supported and improved over time by the community. And obviously that makes it more sustainable and easier to maintain in the long term. So that is another key consideration that we just wanted to highlight here. And we've got a few minutes left for questions. So hopefully, Tia, are you able to read out a question that we can get started with?
Yeah, we had a few. One of them was from Ipinosa asking if other ELMIS systems can be migrated to the version 3 OpenLMIS.
I might ask Wes to take that one.
No problem. Yeah, that's a really good question. So the answer is yes, the technology that we're using to migrate data from version 2, so ELMIS, to version 3 could also be adapted to be able to migrate data from other systems. However, that would be something that we would need another partner to come in and help us do. But the way that works would be able to be ported over to pretty much any data source. So the one complication there that Chong Sung mentioned was the transformation. So that is transforming the data from the original data source to the OpenLMIS version 3 data source. That might be a little bit more complicated if the data is significantly different than what it is in version 2, because version 2 and version 3 are obviously somewhat similar. So that would be the main consideration there.
Great, thank you. Sierra, is there another question that you could read or comment?
Yep, there was one from Mercy asking if the Android solution can be integrated with existing systems, such as MTrack that's currently being used for DHIS2 reporting in Uganda.
I would either Chong Sung or Wes, I think those might be for you as well.
I don't mind answering this one. Chong Sung, if you want to provide any context, you're welcome to as well. So can the Android solution be integrated with existing systems? I'm not an expert on that Android solution. On the back end, it's theoretically possible, depending on what the specifics of MTrack are. I would suggest that if the primary usage for that system would be to be able to gather DHIS2 information. If that information is similar to what we're already gathering in version 3 for DHIS2, it would be kind of an unnecessary secondary step because we already are collecting and shortly we'll be able to automatically upload DHIS2 information. So it would depend on exactly what metrics you need to send to DHIS2. But I would say it's probably not the Android project, the Android solution that you would integrate. It would be the backend system. So OpenLMIS.
Great. Any other comments from any of our other presenters on that question? Okay. Okay, maybe we can take one last quick question, Sierra. We have 1 minute.
All right. Another question is, how is the project working to ensure availability of local capacity in general?
I will maybe leave that one for our Mozambique colleagues so they can speak to their experience. Philemoni or Momad, could you speak to how you're working with the local capacity building issue?
Philemoni, will you take this? This is Antonio Lima for PSM Mozambique.
Hello.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello, Rebecca.
Hello, yeah.
This is Alfred. I can try and contribute there from the Tanzania experience.
Thank you.
Yes, so I think with regards to the local capacity, in Tanzania, we have begun engaging the government software developers. I think to date we have like 9 software developers that we have had 3 sessions for capacity building with related to OpenLMIS code base. So I think that is one way of trying to engage them, but also making sure that they are aware or equipped with some basic knowledge of OpenLMIS. We know government staff are busy, but I think the least we can do is for them to have the basic knowledge, but also connect them to the community so that each of them can go on a learning curve depending on the pace and interest that they can work with, but also trying to institutionalize the government responsibilities towards sustainability to make sure that the system is well in place in the government structures and is supported over time. So that's the Tanzania experience that I can share.
Great, thanks, Alfred. And as I know, you're also engaged in some activities in Tanzania. Do you have any reflections or comments from your experience that you wanted to add?
Relating to the Casper project?
Just the webinar overall, any reflections?
Yes, so I think this is some good stuff. For the past few months, I think there was, I would say, no attempt brought to a bigger group of how a migration could be done. So I think this the Casper project itself tries to lay down an upgrade option or a path to do that. And this work, I think it solves the technology part of it and how people can consider upgrading bigger systems or mature systems near real time. And it only leaves now the other pieces of governance and trying to manage all the other business component if countries decide to upgrade. So I think it's an eye opener. There is still some more like a Q&A that needs to revolve around all of the migration work that needs to be in place to ensure that when an upgrade is happening, every piece of data or the transformation works well. So I think we have good experience with the work that is done so far, and we are confident that more work on it will give us a good path for an upgrade.
Great, thank you for those comments and reflections. I see there's other questions coming in, but I also see that we're a few minutes past the hour and I want to be respectful of people's time. So what we can do is document the questions that have come in, and when we send our follow-up email with the slides and the recording, we can also attempt to respond to your questions and circulate those responses as part of that email. So we will address your questions. We just don't have time to do them all now. So I think I'll just wrap things up by saying thank you again to all of our presenters and to everyone who was able to join us today. We're very happy that you spent time with us today and that you're interested in this topic, and we look forward to engaging with you more. Thank you, everyone.
And Rebecca, let me just jump in and say that if there's anyone who has more questions or would like to have a more detailed discussion about how OpenLMIS could possibly work in your country or your context, please don't hesitate to contact either Rebecca or I, and we would be more than happy to continue this conversation.
Absolutely. Thanks, Wes. And just to call everyone's attention to the last slide, it has our contact information on our website. That email address that's listed there, the info@openlmis.org, it will go directly to me. So I will see your email if you send it to that address. Great. Thanks, everyone, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.